case before the Supreme Court this session is set to address whether bans on so-called conversion therapy are constitutional under the First Amendment.
In the past, the practice offered professional counseling with the goal of changing someone's sexual orientation, especially in gay teens. But many states implemented bans over the last decade or so as doctors and psychologists came to the consensus that it was ineffective and even harmful. According to the New York Times, the American Psychological Association concluded that sexual orientation change efforts could induce depression, suicidal ideation, self-blame, guilt, and loss of hope in some people. That led to 22 states and D.C. banning the practice and several more restricting it.
But a Christian counselor is now challenging Colorado's ban, arguing the laws passed by those states bars her from offering voluntary faith-based therapy for kids. And while the court won't hand down its decision until June, the AP reports the court's conservative majority seemed to agree with that counselor, with Justice Alito saying the law, quote, looks like blatant viewpoint discrimination.
Joining us now to discuss the case is senior counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom, Jon Scruggs. Jon, thanks so much.
Lawyers from the Alliance Defending Freedom, of course. Thanks for joining us, are representing the counselor in this case. And Jon, I just want to clarify some of the things we said in the intro. I didn't get a chance to look at the script beforehand. I would not describe this as conversion therapy. And I think it's important to point out that what is also at issue in this case is whether or not kids who go to a counselor, if the counselor who are suffering from gender dysphoria or quote unquote gender identity issues, if the counselor tells them that you are happy and you should be happy in the body that you were born in, there's nothing wrong with your body, that is actually prohibited under this law.
That's absolutely right. Our client, Kaylee Childs, only engaged in conversation. So many of the things you quoted from before were talking about things like shock therapy that our client just doesn't do. So as Colorado's own experts admit, they have no proof that anything that our client does causes any harm at all. And what that means is the state of Colorado is just playing favorites and banning conversations to help kids. And what that end result is, it's going to push kids toward dangerous drugs and procedures to, effectively change their bodies to make them lifelong patients.
So I live in Colorado, and I actually met a woman who was a mom that had a transgender daughter, and she explained kind of that process that her daughter went through, the surgery that she went through. And she explained that, as a mom, I was faced with the decision when she turned 18, was basically allow her to commit this surgery change, or she was telling me that she was having thoughts of suicide without doing it. And so how do you respond in those cases that have nuance? Because as you know, the world is learning and understanding this more, and everyone wants to try to avoid doing the wrong thing. But as a mom, when I heard that, I was immediately alarmed, like wondering what I would do.
Yeah, well, actually, the studies say that when you undergo the procedures and these life-altering drugs, that the rates of suicide increase. So it's actually the reverse. But if you just take that argument and apply it here to counseling and to what Colorado's done, Colorado is cutting off options to parents and kids about conversations, about willing conversations that parents and kids want to have. Colorado is saying, hey, your goals that are chosen by the parents and the kids are forbidden from even talking about them. And that just goes squarely in the face of the First Amendment and violates the First Amendment. So if you're concerned about choice and about respecting parents and kids, you'd be strongly opposed to what Colorado is doing.
Yeah, and Jon, I just want to be clear here, because in a case where a child is going through the process of trying to grapple with what it is they think they are, this law would prohibit a counselor from even suggesting that they should be good with where they're at. It only allows them to actually push the child towards making the decision to change their gender, right?
That's right. It's a one-way ratchet. It says you can't have conversations to help them realign their bodies with their identity, but you can push them toward the drugs and procedures. And that's such problematic because 90% of kids who are struggling with gender dysphoria naturally desist and align their identity with their bodies. So it naturally happens. Why can't we talk about it? Colorado is saying you can't have those conversations, but you can only push kids one way. It just, again, we shouldn't let the government dictate what conversations people can have, and that includes counselors and families and children.
So is there no nuance in the law? Like, is there no conversation? I know you said it says you can push them to the way of having the steps forward to change their gender, and there's no conversation allowed about sticking to the gender that you were born with. Is there a part of the law that would allow somebody in a leadership role, like a psychologist, to just listen, to be somebody who's there kind of not guiding them in either way, but just also being an ear to create a safe space for somebody who's going through that difficult period in their life?
Well, in conversations in counseling, as anyone knows, in counseling, it's a conversation. You don't just sit there and don't engage. You have to have a conversation, to listen, to ask questions, sometimes to challenge, but a lot of times to create that safe space to engage in a dialogue. And here we're talking about goals selected by the client. My client, Kaylee Childs, doesn't force anyone into her counselor's office. She doesn't coerce anybody. Her clients come to her willingly and say, this is my goal. I want to achieve this goal, help me. And Colorado says that type of counseling is illegal. And that just makes no sense to me, that we're playing this type of favorites where you can pick and choose what someone can say in a private conversation between themselves and their counselors. Kids need help. They need more options, not less. And so I think we should respect the First Amendment and allow those parents and those kids to make these type of counseling choices.
Jon, I wanted to get into the arguments that were presented yesterday in front of the Supreme Court. Can you give us some insight into how you think those went?
I think they went very well for us. I mean, obviously, you never want to count your chickens before they're hatched, but even the more liberal and progressive justices are asking very difficult questions of the other side, suggesting that they thought Colorado was violating the First Amendment. Justice Kagan asked a question and said basically like, this doesn't make much sense that you're saying that you will allow one type of counseling for one view but not another. Justice Sotomayor admitted from the bench that it seemed like Colorado did credibly threaten our client with the way their statute applied. So we're pretty hopeful from what the argument produced. And I think that just makes sense because this is really a common sense thing. The way the law works and the way the law regulates counselors, we typically don't tell counselors and clients what they can and can't talk about when clients want to talk about it. So we feel like this is a relatively easy First Amendment issue, and we're hopeful that the court will agree with us.
So what's next? What are the next steps that you're waiting to see happen? And what are you telling your client in these moments while you wait?
Well, we're waiting for a court opinion, as you all noted in your opening, that it could not come till June of next year, but it might come earlier. It might come as, maybe around April. So we're telling our client, currently she's forbidden from doing this counseling, so that's causing her irreparable harm, so she can't do that. So we're just in a watching and waiting game until we hear from the U.S. Supreme Court.
All right, Jon Scruggs with the Alliance Defending Freedom. We really appreciate you taking the time this morning. We know you're very busy.
Thank y'all so much.
All right, have a great day. We have a lot more to talk about on Rising. Stay with us.